Welcome to Keeping the Beat, an engaging web series hosted live by TNMEA in partnership with the CMA Foundation. Tune in weeknights Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to learn from and interact with music professionals from around the globe, representing every facet of the vast world of music. Today is Thursday, April 30th. My name is Lafe Cook, and I'm the band director at Dobyns-Bennett High School in Kingsport, Tennessee, and I'm also very honored to be TNMEA president. And I'm here tonight with my wife, Dr. Heather Cook, who is an author and a lover of music education and has presented at Midwest Clinic and at our own TNMEA conference. And we are very pleased to be here tonight to talk to you. The title of our session is Doing the Right Thing as we Head into the Unknown. I encourage you to interact by replying to this live video stream with your questions and comments, which we will respond to throughout the hour. One disclaimer, while this is being streamed live, it will remain on the Keeping the Beat Facebook page for future reference. So as such, your comments will also remain a part of the archive. Now, as TNMEA president, and if you're a Tennessean, we are intentionally rebranding TNMEA to be TNMEA, and it falls off the lips a little awkwardly, but that is an intentional statement. This endeavor is really the brainchild of Julie Hill, who's a longtime TNMEA member and who's the department chair for the music department at UTM. This sort of grew, the TNMEA's involvement and the CMA Foundation's involvement sort of came as an outgrowth of the canceling of our professional development conference. And Julie's got a great crew of people at UTM who are helping her, and I want to recognize those folks. Chelsea Jones and Katie Smith and Elizabeth Emmons. There's some other folks. Alexis Derryberry, who's going to be your next TNMEA president, has worked tirelessly doing all the technical support. She literally, until very recently, has been the tech support person for every one of these presentations going on now 4 weeks of 4 nights a week. She has some great help now from Kat Sams and Carrie Ratcliffe. None of this would be possible without the wonderful support of the CMA Foundation and many of you who are in music education, not just in Tennessee, but around the country, know who Tiffany Kearns is, and Fallon Keith, who also is part of the foundation, have been very valuable in helping all of this happen. So the title of our presentation is probably bears some explaining. Now, if you're a parent, it's like super obvious. When we were asked to do this, we thought, what are we going to call it? And it fell out of our lips. Do the right thing, because we all need to be thinking about doing the right thing in this weird moment we're in. And then into the unknown. So we instantly knew what that meant because we have a kindergartner who we are trapped in the house with all the time. And so we're here. These are songs from Frozen 2. So if you don't know Frozen 2, the title of our session seems a little lofty, but these are the 2 popular songs from Frozen 2. So that was the nature of our title, and we're so pleased to be talking to you. We're the follow-up act to Dr. Tim, and so we're not here to try and one-up Dr. Tim's inspiration.
Well, he's sharing the music gospel. That's what we felt like was happening last night, and we're not sharing, the Cook family is not sharing the gospel tonight, but what we hope to do is offer, just kind of transition into, you got all inspired last night and motivated, and now let's transition into some nuts and bolts so that we can walk away with a plan for what's going on. So just some takeaways that we hope to offer you tonight. One is being proactive and figuring out how to prove your value. There's some very tough decisions getting ready to come up from administrators and beyond, and we have to be able to be consistent in showing how important we are and the impact that we have for our programs and our students and our communities and beyond. We also need to anticipate concerns that are going to come up through the summer and of course this fall and whatever that looks like, and it is still the unknown. And then finally, we need to finish this year strong. So we're going to share some ideas that we have about wrapping up this year and making sure when students reflect upon this time that music teachers were a big part of guiding what that reflection looks like. So, right now it's very easy to disengage. How many of us are tired of hearing the word Zoom? How many of us have probably muted and not paid attention and did something else during a video conference. Like, it just happens. It's so easy to do that. And I think that music has the opportunity to transcend all that. We have some, there's options to move beyond just what a video conference can offer. It's hard for a statistics class or English composition or some classes like that to really kind of still tie to, like, okay, yes, it's homework. How meaningful was my homework? And yes, okay, I take another test and another quiz. And meaningful interactions are a little harder to come by through those traditional classroom efforts. And I think that this is honestly an opportunity for us to understand the emotional connection and make sure people beyond just our students understand the emotional connection that music can have. So here we go.
And this whole thing is somewhat conversational, and so we hope you'll ask us questions. If you'd have to live in a cave and never look at a computer or a smartphone to not know that social media is blown up with more evidence than ever before that what we do has value. The whole world has turned to music. And when this whole thing first started and there were all the scenes of Italians on their balconies joining in song, and since then that experience has accelerated globally and in our country certainly in recent weeks. And so that's the thing we need to remember, that the world has given us evidence that when things get weird and hard, that music is what people turn to. That's something all of us already knew as music educators, but I think it's important that we now have more evidence than we used to have to that fact. My daughter, we got the 5-year-old we mentioned who loves Frozen 2 and Frozen 1 and all of those. I've got another daughter who's a senior in high school, and she's been logging on to mandatory meetings for her academic classes. And she's got great teachers. We got great teachers at Dobyns-Bennett High School. But I was struck when we did our first, she did a math meeting before we did a band meeting. And so her math meeting, which was mandatory, the teacher expected 60 kids. They expected 60 kids to log on to the meeting. And I think the first meeting there were 11. And then she had a mandatory math Zoom meeting, and the next one there were 4. And so she had 2 math meetings before we had done a band Zoom meeting for Dobyns-Bennett High School. And so I was scared to death. I didn't know what to expect. And we did our Zoom meetings, and across the 4 meetings we had by grade, we had 280 kids participate in the meetings. And so I think that speaks to how kids value their music education classes. And at the secondary level, those large ensemble experiences like choir and band and orchestra, that's very grounding for students. And there was an article in the Washington Post that was written by Sarah Robinson, who's a Middle Tennessean, and talked about the super importance that these music classes have for little kids who come to school for their music class. It's what gets them to school each day. And these are important things for us to remember. But that's all warm, fuzzy stuff that we know. Dr. Tim inspired us on all this kind of language last night. But school districts and state governments are getting ready to have to make some difficult decisions. And so what we want to talk to you, one of the things we want to talk to you tonight about is how in this moment you can try, even virtually, to collect data that protects your value, that proves your value as a music teacher. Because I fear that that's going to be more important than ever. And that when the email comes from your principal or your district's personnel person to schedule a meeting with you, and you're nervous about what that means in a situation where school budgets are we all know, going to be slashed, that you're ready to answer that. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about stakeholders and the various stakeholders that you can approach to try and collect data. And I mean data, I'm using that in a loose way. But right now in this moment in time, people are feeling, because they're disconnected from their music classes, they're feeling really nostalgic about it, sappy about it, and that's super specific to high school seniors. But fifth graders who are getting ready, who didn't get a whole half of a year basically, and are getting ready to go on to middle school, or eighth graders, same thing, getting ready to go on to high school. These are kids and families who are nostalgic about their ensemble music classes. And so, or they're general music classes, because those teachers, have great connections with students too. And so it's a great moment to collect testimonials, for lack of a better way to put it, collect testimonials from these families. And while that may sound self-serving, these are going to be people who want to do it. They want to connect with you as their kid's music teacher. And so it's an opportunity for you to collect some data about what your program has meant to these kids and their families. And so I would urge teachers at every level, elementary, middle, high school, to reach out to those final grades in each of those categories and just say, hey, we're thinking about you, would love, we miss you, you arguably miss us. We want to hear about what your kid's experience was like, and that, again, may sound self-serving, but I think as much as you want to collect the data, those families will want to give it to you.
And that anecdotal evidence is actually really powerful, because that's community leaders. Those are people in your community that want something specific. And also, there's resources, Music Makes Us Foundation. So if you really need to go to the hard data that really talks about the nuts and bolts of what music can offer, we want to do that too, because everyone loves a good story, and that's what tugs at the heartstrings. But when those tough decisions come, you've got to have some hard, fast data beyond a good story.
It's the whole thing where we don't have test data. And so justifying our existence and quantifying our excellence is challenging in a different way for music classes. We all have those emails. I think about the number of emails I've gotten from some parent who wants me or our orchestra teacher or our choir teacher to fix a kid. And so you get the email from Johnny's mom that says the only teacher he'll listen to is you. We all have these emails. And so he's getting an F in English, and we can't do anything with him at home, and his English teacher's not getting anywhere. Can you please, as the music teacher, talk to Johnny, and let's help get his English grade up? And, what I'm talking about, getting testimonials from these fans, it's the same thing. It's getting those on-paper explanations about how families, parents, view their kids' music classroom experience, I am afraid that, with sales tax revenue plummeting, our own city is already estimating, what was it, millions of dollars in loss. Those are all projections at this point, and we're not that big a place. Large metropolitan cities in our state and across the country are going to lose tons of revenue. And so that's a thing you cannot ignore. The other thing you can't ignore is virtual engagement with your students. And I've got some, I'm as curmudgeonly about this stuff as it comes. And Heather knows this is true. And I've got colleagues who are even more curmudgeonly than I am about the virtual engagement. It's like everybody's a first-year teacher now. I'm a somewhat of a veteran in our state, and I've been teaching, almost 30 years. And suddenly I feel like a new teacher. It's like the mentor-mentee role has flipped. And I'm all the time calling my young colleague who's 25 years old, wonderful talent, but only been teaching 3 or 4 years. And he's now my mentor on all this virtual learning stuff, And so many of us don't have this skill set. But it's not a thing we can ignore, because while it's our reality now, it is possible that it's going to be our reality longer. And so as we are approached by decision makers who are having to make tough decisions about budgets, I think we're going to need more than historic anecdotal evidence and a recording of the choir at performance assessment or a videotape of the marching band. I think we're going to need more than that. We're going to need short-term indicators, not just that we were engaged with our students, but that our students wanted to be engaged with. And I think that's going to be an important thing. The big multi-window video, it's, you're seeing them left and right all over social media, nonstop. And the virtual band concerts. And we did one at DB. I've got a super talented person who works with me. Ryan Gilbert is his name, and he we collected videos of all, we did the thing. We collected videos of all our kids playing a piece, and it's so great. And I want to show you a little snippet of it because I'm really proud of Ryan's work. And so we've all seen these same things on social media, and as time goes on, more and more of them are appearing. That's tough to do. What you just saw took Ryan hours and hours of editing, and that's in his skill set. And there are companies popping up who are willing to do that service for you for money, and you can probably find someone in community. And as music teachers, we have a large circle of connectivity. You can probably find someone to do that, but you still got to be set up to collect that many videos. So we recognize that stuff, and we were able to do that simply because Ryan has the skill set. But the idea that you can engage with one or two students virtually musically, now you're engaging with all of your students, hopefully Zoom as therapy, and that's a really meaningful use of the Zoom meeting stuff right now. And so using those Zoom calls with your students is therapy, vital, important, but probably not enough to protect someone who's looking at furloughing your position. And so if you can create opportunities separate from the huge editing process of a virtual band concert, if you can find opportunities to engage musically with kids and collect one kid, two kids who can collaborate together on a duet, they can do the technology on their own. Send that to you through whatever your school system's platform is. You provide feedback. There's a teaching moment. You collect those experiences as evidence to a decision maker that not just virtual meeting went on, but virtual learning went on. Dr. Tim talked last night about all the important things that music means to students and communities, and that's a music educator talking to other music educators. And he's the best at it in the world. But if you can get non-music educators to talk about what we do to other non-music educators, that has incredible value. So don't be afraid of the virtual learning. There's people out there who will help you.
And I think when you talk about virtual learning, it's what everyone's talking about now, and it's almost like we're just tired of hearing it, and it's like we're being forced to do it, and it's our only option. But I think that we need to shift our mindset on how we're thinking about virtual learning to Lafe's point of we don't know how long this might continue. But also use it as a form of communication. Every good professional development course says something about how communication is the most important key. And it is, but this time we're relearning what communication looks like. So it's just different channels over different mediums with people not comfortable with it. Like when you are in a space, if you are in your music room, you are comfortable in communicating with your students. You always have been. And so it's a comfort level that you have. And guess what? Almost 90%, 70 to 90% of what you do is the nuanced nonverbal you're giving your students. Yes, you're giving them instruction verbally, but the way you present yourself, and if you wink, or if you tell a little joke, or how you're standing, and your presence actually speaks so much louder than what your words do. And we've all heard that, and we all know that, but we're actually having to live it in a different world. We're actually in the video game, if you will. And so that communication has to shift. And so you think about it, take a piece of music. If you were to write out what that piece of music means when you communicate, we're now shifting away from virtual and communicating actually to your constituents and your students and your parents. Take a piece of music, write out what it means. Now, does that replace playing it? Never. It'll never replace playing it. So when you think about the next email you're sending that would have been in person, or the next pitch you were going to give to the Board of Education, it's harder to translate that into words. And so I feel like we're so used to getting away with a lot by sharing it in a physical space that it's a little more difficult to continue that in a written space, especially if you're texting, it's a text thread, and all these different new mediums that we're looking at. And so over communicating is not really something that can happen right now.
No, and I've heard colleagues say, I'm nervous to send too many emails. Like, what's the alternative? And so are we over communicated with? Absolutely. I mean, but the alternative isn't to not do it. I was thinking about friends of mine who are still resistant to the virtual band experience, whatever that means. And one of the things that gets said is, I don't want to get too far down this road, and the fear that decision makers will believe this can replace in-person, creativity and in-person music making. And I would argue that if you go down the virtual engagement road with your students, the level of their engagement proves that their experience when you were doing it in person had value.
Okay, so Julie Hill has shared something. Lafe, I loved how you said you were typically in the role of the experienced mentor, but now some of your younger colleagues are becoming your teacher. That's beautiful, and I feel the same way in working with Alexis, Carrie, and Catherine on Keeping the Beat and more. Leaders have to be willing to change the time and lose any ego, aka traditional band director roles, in order to do so. I would just like others to comment on how they already have pivoted like you have and made some changes to adapt quickly. So anyone else out there who really feels like those roles have switched and you're in the first year teacher role learning these new methods of teaching.
It's not gone unnoticed that Julie called band directors egotistical. That did not go unnoticed. So I'm going to shift, and if anyone weighs in on that topic, we're happy to go back and address it. So as you look at the collection of experiences and data and anecdotal evidence that your job has value, especially in this moment in time when you're not with your students in person and you're not making music in the traditional ways, I think it's also important that you consider planning for every possible picture of what the school year could look like next year. And of course you're doing that. I mean, I don't want to insult anyone's intelligence to think that you're not considering what the school year could look like. But I mean, there are some crazy scenarios. You're looking at, of course, normal is possible. Not likely. Yeah, probably not normal, not really even normal. If it is normal. I'll be a little band-centric here for a moment. But you could have, for high school band, you could have a normal school year start, but none of the summer prep stuff. Well, we can probably survive that. The one that is really hard to wrap your head around is the normal start time, but your school district is wanting to reduce class sizes to where you're only allowed a limited number of students or at a certain distance apart from one another in your class, and suddenly the size of your facility equal to the size of your program becomes a complete factor in how you are going to be able to do your job and schedule students. A rotating schedule where some of the kids come Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday shift in order to reduce those class sizes. And these are things that no school system has made a decision on yet, but many school systems are talking about. And so don't be blindsided by not thinking about what that could look like for your program. That's one of those where you're talking to your school system's schedulers. During fourth period band, let's find out where empty rooms are, where other teachers have planning. Like how do we figure out a method by which we can break kids up? This whole thing will lead to some economic realities we'll talk about later, but the potential to redirect traditional spending, especially in a high school program, to get more folks in to work with your kids, which allows you to divide them up in different ways. Working musicians are going to be hurting worse than many professionals in our society as our economy struggles. Those people are going to be looking for opportunities to make some money. Get those people in your classroom, and in that moment, you're able to divide your large ensembles into smaller groups.
One quick comment from Laura Shepard. With 25 years in front of kids under my belt, I am absolutely terrified by what is coming down the pike. I think many others feel like you do. It says, give me my kids in a classroom and I am golden. And now I'm struggling daily to connect with my kids. And so I feel like, don't feel like you're alone, because everyone is trying to navigate this right now. And they don't have, some of them don't have instruments at home, and so I don't know if you want to speak to how, it's really hard to practice if you don't have access to your instrument.
There's no easy answer to that. If you're an instrumental teacher, music teacher, there is no easy answer to that. That's where the Zoom as therapy piece becomes your best tool. Stay connected with those kids. We're going to talk a little more about communication, but you have to stay connected and communicate to all your stakeholders, those kids, their parents, your administrators, etc.
And if you don't feel comfortable with the virtual learning, it's okay. I think that there's solace in them just seeing your face. And even if you don't do music class, if you're talking about their day or what's been going on or what are they struggling with, if you really are that therapist and it's not even music related, you're still maintaining some sort of connection that they really need in this time. Abby Jenkins mentioned that they're doing physical packets, not virtual learning. And students had option of 5 music choices in their learning grid format, which is frustrating when trying to give directions in less than 2 minutes. I absolutely believe that. And so you don't know if the students are participating or not if it's not virtual. So you know what? People are doing the best they can with the resources they have. And so our kindergartner has picked up packets and are doing those as well. So I think there's a range of options of how people are trying to weather through this.
In our state, in Tennessee, and there's probably people watching from out of state, but Tennessee, to Abby's point, Tennessee is a diverse state, and we've got kids who are immediate access to internet and engaged in virtual learning with math, English, and music, and then we got kids whose only connection with school now that we're not going to the brick and mortar buildings is the packets, and that's best case getting the packets. But again, that's where you must do what you can do to protect I want to say protect your job, but what I mean is protect the experience your job provides students. And of course you want to protect your job, but whatever you can do, and some of that is the engagement of stakeholders that aren't currently students and parents. Stakeholder engagement is a vital piece of what we do. Not always a necessary piece. You can survive without conscious stakeholder engagement. But if you're doing your job day in, day out, you have it. You have stakeholders automatically. And so the ability to go back in time and look up those emails and consider those relationships in order to set yourself up for job security and student experience security, therefore, is important.
So we have a question. Chris Seeger says, I'm returning to high school band after teaching middle school for 13 years. What advice do you have for preparing for the fall semester? Thank you so much for the segue. Especially as it pertains to marching band. Are you planning for the best case, everything's typical, or waiting to see what's possible later? We are not waiting. You may not have answers, but you need to have options.
And that's an important point. Glenn Adsett, who was the presenter on this very thing Tuesday on Keeping the Beat, he said, the hardest thing about this is not having answers. And while I completely agree with that,
it's half our title.
Yeah, but not having answers is not going to be an option. You need to have options that you can present your school, your kids, their families. Marching band, so at our school, we've planned for things to be normal, knowing they're not going to be. But the good news is, in the world of competitive marching band, if there is no marching band, you have also then not spent as much money. And so on the financial end of things, this whole marching band activity is something that high school band directors are going to have to consider. These same parallels exist across all the different genres at the secondary level. if we're not allowed to bring large, okay, let me back up. So TSSAA is talking about all kinds of scenarios for high school football. We all know that football funds every other sport at a high school. That's not just true in Tennessee, it's true everywhere. And so the TSSAA is going to, what we do isn't connected to money. The TSSAA is connected to money, and what they do generates revenue. And so they're going to protect, to the degree they can, and be considerate of safety and regulation. They're going to protect high school football, as they should. So what does that mean for us? They're talking about starting football in early August and ending in early October. So just accelerating the season to start early. That's one option. They're talking about flipping the seasons. And so high school football would occur in the winter or spring. Well, you're going to do band camp in January, And so these are things you've got to think about and what all that could mean. But I think the most important piece, you got to consider show design. You got to make sure you don't spend money for a product that then will be useless to you. And so that's certainly a consideration. So your design folks, if you're paying for drill writers, you've got to make sure there's an understanding with your design folks that, look, we're in a position, you're in a position, we can talk about what might happen, but you need to protect your program's resources in this way by not extending yourself in hopes that things will be normal.
So we do have some creative solutions that we want to share to see if they might be relevant or helpful or for you to think through for your own program. Think about marching band and how we feel about it, just whether at the high school level or the college level. I mean, gosh, for years we've been fighting this battle of, do you just play the music over the loudspeakers? And we are all screaming, no, we don't do that. And so I think there's other solutions, instead of going into a huge stadium with a lot of people, what if you have a social distancing pep band that travels throughout your community? This is a way to get noticed. And right now, while you're proving your value and you've got to create a plan so you can justify why you need to keep everything you have right now to protect the student experience, then you need to be noticed. So the more often you can be present in your community. So if there is not the typical form of marching band and there's not the whatever the fall looks like, if there's more time than you normally had, then you can kind of have these new experiences, things you've always thought, I'd love to do this, but I never have time.
As a high school band director, one of the things coming right out of the fall, one of the things you dread is basketball pep band. And while those student athletes deserve all the same support that the student athletes playing football deserve, it's just kind of hard coming out of the fall being asked to do that. If there is no marching band, that is the opportunity, and things have settled down by basketball season, and they're allowing large groups to gather in arenas. Think about just spending a portion of the time you're spending preparing your marching band. You can have the world's greatest basketball pep band. Your community will go wild. You'll create new supporters for the program, for those parents who are connected to the basketball program, and so these are the kind. There's a magical choir I've always wanted to do as a choir teacher. I've never found the time to do it. The fall musical's canceled, but now there's an opportunity to do something that I've not been able to find the time to do in the past. Chamber music. And all this rolls back to protecting our jobs and our value. Many of us get supplements in addition to our regular salaries. Most of the time, those supplements for high school are attached to after-school time commitment. The musical, marching band, etc. Okay, so are we willing to just let those supplements go, or are we going to come up with a plan to replace those after-school commitments that are educationally relevant for our students and communicatable to decision makers like administrators? We need to be ready for those decisions as well.
So we have a question from Matt Carter, former drum major at Dobyns-Bennett. Thanks for tuning in. So he has moved into the business world, you can tell, because he's asking about key performance indicators here. So given how important stakeholder buy-in is to music programs, what are key performance indicators for those programs that they can provide in lieu of a band show or a competition in the event of a worst-case scenario? And one question at a time, we'll start with that.
Well, I think maybe to Matt's point, I think what I just said is the answer, and I don't have all the answers currently, but just finding a replacement for those high-profile events that are traditional, like marching band at halftime of the football game, and how you get your program visible in a way that is acceptable given whatever our social circumstances are when that time arises. You know, Heather mentions the traveling community pep band. That's like, you know, every neighborhood in your school's community's got a open space, and you just take a performing group there that can do that and publicize those things. And I mean, gosh, I'd like to do that now.
We have a quick idea. We went to the Rose Parade last year, and we had a big gala to raise money, which fundraising, we're not even tackling that tonight because no one's asking for money. That's really difficult. But a live auction item was a free pep band. And the gentleman who wanted it at Halloween. And so we're going to dress up and go to Halloween, go to their neighborhood, which was what prompted, not Halloween specific, but which prompted the idea. Like, that's a unique opportunity that the community would love and celebrate, that would get you noticed, would keep the, you know, your name out there and how important music can be. So go and sing and go and play and go and act, and there's all kinds of opportunities to do that. So Matt, one last thing he also asked was, how does a program maintain student and community buy-in in the event that all these high exposure events are canceled? Not possible.
Well, I don't know. For elementary music and middle school music, that might be more challenging. I think at the secondary level, but this is also true certainly for middle school programs. Like, it's, ensemble music classes is a sense of community. And so often, at least a portion of a kid's identity is attached to their involvement in that program. And so what you have to do is remind them. So you got to remind them of their love of the activity. And that's where the communication is key. The Zoom meetings is therapy for sure, but there's, if you're in a community where online engagement isn't really high for your kids, you got to find other ways, a physical mail out, whatever it takes to remind those kids and their families of what that program and music making in the program means for kids, But it's tough. There's no denying that maintaining those connections, especially in populations where online engagement isn't high, that's a challenge. No question.
Donald Benton, thanks for joining in. So he says, normally we set up the year for our end of year of activities to give students a sense of completion and reflection of how great the year was. Unfortunately, we aren't seeing that right now. So does anyone have fear that you're going to lose more students this year? We got a whole section on finishing strong, but quickly, what do you think about losing students? Retention and recruitment, I guess. Also
sure.
Getting new ones.
And the earlier question sort of addressed that too. I am not super worried about losing students. I'd like to believe, and this is just completely conjecture on my part, but it's sort of the absence makes the heart grow fonder effect. You just hope that them not being there, it makes them like it more, I think about the years when we used to do indoor drumline, and we would come out of hot and heavy fall marching band, and we'd ask kids to then do hot and heavy indoor drumline, and at the semester we'd lose kids. And then we stopped doing indoor drumline, and we stopped losing kids. And then at the end of percussion ensemble concert band semester, they were just foaming at the mouth to do marching percussion again. And so I think that maybe is the dynamic I hope plays across our band program and choir and band programs at every level, that they just, in not having it day to day, they recognize that they miss it, Let's talk a little bit about the money piece. And again, this is just about you planning for what is potentially the inevitable collapse of how our programs are financed. And, I mentioned sales tax revenues are certainly going to be much lower than they have been. That impacts directly your district's budget. As we know, budget cuts are frequently passed on to the arts first. You're going to do all the work you can do to protect your position, but when hard decisions have to be made, funding, for those of you who are lucky enough to get funding, and I know there are many of you who don't get much, But if you're getting funding from your district, just be ready to figure out how you replace those funding streams. The same thing will be true for those of us who are operating booster groups. You know, there have been years where, you know, a fundraiser doesn't go great, and so the next year we budget to not make as much. We don't know if that fundraiser is going to work, so we're going to budget to make a little less on the fundraiser, but hey, we're going to charge every kid $5 more, $10 more on their band fee. You're not going to want to do that, obviously. You're not going to want to raise band fees. You're arguably going to want to lower band fees, eliminate band fees, you know, depending on what a band program is looking at doing in the fall. Are families in your community going to have disposable income to buy fundraising products, which are never a good deal anyway? No one buys the fruit you're selling because it's a good deal. They buy the fruit you're selling to support your program and to support the kids' experience. Without, you know, I guess it's just, if our country's looking at 15 to 20% unemployment, you have to decide what that means in your community. You know, and that's going to be different in Kingsport than it is going to be in West Knoxville, than it is going to be in Shelby County. And every part of Shelby County is going to be different than every other part. And so I'm just encouraging people to think about that before it comes flying out of the night at you.
So Megan Christian, she says, how can we help create a presence on social media while not having an in-person presence? I think that's so important right now because it's one of the few things you're limited to where people still can see and interact with you. So I think from a social media standpoint, there's a whole other session that can be talked about that. But very quickly, if you can create a calendar and create meaningful posts, they don't have to be instructional. It doesn't have to be this thing just for students to disseminate information. It can be celebratory. It can be reminders of why we love music. And so if you can kind of add some of that fluff in there and make it interesting and have good pictures, then you're crafting this story that people start paying attention to. And then when it's time to really hit them with something, you've kind of gained that audience and you're going to have a larger engagement level than if you just send something when it's instructional.
And you consider the earlier question about fear of losing students and making sure they remember their band experience now that they're, or choir experience, or orchestra
posting
experience.
A video from 10 years ago, people will love it.
Yeah, or
love it.
Or a series of video, like advertise that seniors on Monday of next week, we're going to play the show from your freshman year. And then on Monday of the next week, we're going to do the show from your sophomore year. Yeah. And they're all tuning in, you know. The same thing would be true for choir programs, you know. Just dole those things out through your social media platforms to create engagement and to pull heartstrings so you don't lose kids.
And the next question is, oh my gosh, that's going to take so much time. Well, many of us have more of that. But you also can schedule these things ahead. So if you know that you want to do these 8 videos, you can just schedule those out. Take an hour or 2 a week to kind of get organized on that, and it can really have an impact.
For sure. On the financial impact piece, I want to say a couple other things. You know, our programs are so, especially band programs, but at the high school level, some choir programs too, are so connected to athletics. I guess what I'm talking about is maybe concession stand. You know, your program helps run a concession stand. Look at ways, if there is no high school football or high school football is altered in some way that where it doesn't look the same financially for you, think about ways that you can stay connected with your athletic department and potentially replace that revenue. And so what does that look like? Maybe they've never, you know, in the spring when things are better, you know, maybe no one has really sold concessions meaningfully at baseball or at softball. And so maybe your program's able to step up and fill a gap, provide a service, and make a little money to replace revenue lost in the fall. It's all about out-of-the-box thinking with the knowledge that you're just not going to have the same monetary support for your program that you've traditionally had.
And Ben has a good comment here. He said it's also a great time to reach out to band sponsors, even small businesses, and ask what we can do for them. And he says they're beginning to build content to feature them in email communications and on social media. So just remembering that there's this collaborative nature, and remember that it works both ways. And I think that's a great way to stay connected, even though they don't have the ability to give you financial support at this time.
You know, music programs, and Ben makes me think about, that's a wonderful point, you know, and music programs are so we give our performances, our gift to our communities and our school populations is our performances. And we may do some other things. Many programs, do acts of service. But in general, our music programs give our performances, and then we take from everybody else. We take their money and we ask for money and we fundraise. But in most communities, alongside athletic programs, music programs are almost what defines school communities, And you can live in a big metropolitan place like Knox County or Metro Nashville, but each high school is a community. And so if you spend time, to Ben's point, thinking about the other folks who are hurting in your community and ways that your program maybe can give to them, all you're doing is the right thing, the next right thing, and then you're also creating future stakeholders for your program when the time comes where you're comfortable to ask again.
So Justin Scott, great question. Those who are planning these really large trips, so if DB Band were performing in the 2021 Rose Parade, what would our planning mindset be right now? So for any band out there who's either gotten an invitation somewhere or getting ready to plan the big 2 or 4 year trip, what advice do you have to them? Give them.
Okay, so my buddy Darren Davis at Broken Arrow, maybe he's watching, maybe he's not, but that's Broken Arrow's scenario, and Darren is taking his band right now on paper to Grand Nationals and the Rose Parade. And I've not talked to Darren about it, but I do know that travel companies, student travel companies, man, are there examples where maybe they aren't always perfect in their behaviors? Sure. But in general, student travel companies are so hard in the right place. And so if you're already down the road on a trip for next year, the potential for you to roll that back is probably all there, or at least mostly there, and the ability for you to pay your families back. Travel next year, we wouldn't do it. I mean, we are registered for Grand Nationals, and that is not an expensive trip for us. That's a 5-hour bus ride. But is there a chance that won't happen for us? Of course there is. And do we know what that's going to look like for our marching band? We don't. But next year is arguably a year that very few music groups will do a big trip. It's something that we all should remember, speaking to Ben's point about communities. These travel companies are huge supporters of music education. And I didn't get a stipend to say all this, but these travel companies are going to be hurting. And for us to then look at travel 21, 22, to keep these companies in a place where they can support student experiences is probably going to be an important thing for us to consider.
So we only have about 10 or so, 12 minutes left, and so we really wanted to talk about wrapping up this year in a meaningful way. It's just been weird and odd and this nebulous thing, and everything is still uncertain, and so we've almost kind of shifted to what's next, but we really need to take time and wrap up this year in a very meaningful way. And especially seniors all across the country are experiencing this loss, if you will, and they're having these grieving moments of missing some monumental milestones for what they believe in their life. And as a 17, 18-year-old and graduating high school, it's very important to them, and they're missing that opportunity. And prom too, you have to add that in there, prom too. So we've thought about some ideas that we're going to do for Dobyns-Bennett seniors, and I think a lot of people have seen the yard signs for the seniors, but for music specific, we really want to make sure you can be that person. So when seniors reflect upon this time in their life, many years from down the road, you need to have been their person, because you can help shape and guide how they'll reflect upon it. Will they reflect upon it and be like, gosh, it was so good that I still got to play music, I still got to sing? Well, it will be so good that you help navigate that music is bigger than this. This experience is a moment in time. It's not your life. If you can help have and craft those conversations for those seniors, that's what I think your most important role is right now, is having that meaningful closure where you're not going to really see them face to face. You don't give them that hug. You don't give them that attaboy, attagirl. And so how can you offer that to them? So from a senior standpoint, write them all a letter, every single one of them. We got a little extra time, and that's a very daunting task for some of us with a lot of seniors, but when they look back, that will likely be something that they would keep forever. So very worth your time to invest in some meaningful letter to each senior, right? You've probably already thought of that. So something fun, you talk about social media engagement and how do we continue that presence. Get parents to send in baby photos and senior photos, and then so you sprinkle out a couple of seniors, you celebrate what they're doing, where they're going, and then you have their senior photo and their baby photo. So a little bit of fun in there that you can have with seniors.
If you can get a middle school photo, that's especially awkward for them. They like that.
Okay, so you need three. You need the baby photo, the middle school photo, and then the senior photo. And I don't know about other programs, but at the high school level, Dobyns-Bennett offers a scrapbook every year. And back in the day, for those ladies that are tuned in right now, when you remember and hear of crickets and creative memories and the hours we spent scrapbooking, that used to happen every year at Dobyns-Bennett. But now you can take a few great photos and a few great text boxes and upload everything to Shutterfly, and boom, you've got a meaningful document that can pass on to others. And so that's something that even if you've never done that before, it can be something that you offer. Someone may be willing to sponsor that, or the cost may be low enough to offer for a small fee, to then just have some collectible moment so that when they remember their 4 years of high school, they're not just remembering the last 10 weeks.
You're going to find a way to see your seniors again. They may even have stuff they got to turn in, or they've got to come by the school and get their dirty marching band tennis shoes out of the band cubby. So you're going to see them again. And Heather brings up a neat point. To have that Shutterfly created yearbook, you just collect pictures across their 4 years. We give it out every year at our band banquet, at our end of the year banquet, and it's already made. So for the next class, you just delete the pictures from the previous class's freshman year and add the new class's senior year. It's like a rotating yearbook that we're able to give out. That's something you could maybe even have by the end of the month when graduations are supposed to occur. And so that's a neat idea. We've got a couple of ideas. For seniors are hurting. Band seniors are hurting. Choir seniors are hurting. Music seniors, but all senior classes are lamenting the crappy senior year they got dealt. So we're trying to think of ways in our community, not just specific to the band kids, that we can create meaning and push something out that would have value to graduating seniors and their families. And many of our schools are probably going to do virtual graduation. Probably most of us, if not all of us. The idea that there's going to be a large-scale ceremony somewhere is probably pretty slim. And so we're collecting videos of we've asked every one of our seniors to play the Dobyns-Bennett school song in their cap and gown. And we'll show you what that looks like. And you could use these collectively in one of these multi-pane produced videos, but you could also just use it one kid playing their school song. I'll play one of these for you. So you get the picture. We didn't tell that young lady to smile charmingly into the camera. We collected a bunch of these, and it was neat to see. You could see the emotion in the kids as they did it. I want to show you one more just to prove my point. So you can see how that, whatever your school's alma mater or the school fight song, you can see how that would be pretty powerful potentially to even use singularly one kid, your school produces some video featuring all the senior class, and there's one kid playing whatever the emotional song attached to your school is. And so that's idea one. And then the other thing we plan to do is at the moment graduation we've uploaded that same school song in unison melody. So we've created that as a unison melody for every instrument. And we've uploaded that. And at the moment graduation was supposed to occur on Saturday, May 23rd at 10 a.m., we're going to tell every kid in our band program to walk outside their door and play our school's school song, so that all across our community in every neighborhood you'll hear the Dobyns-Bennett fight song being played as a salute to our senior class. And we think that that'll have real value to not just the music kids and the band kids, but
the community.
But our community. And that's a small town moment, we get that, but every school has a school community, even if you're part of a much bigger community.
So at this time, this is a learning platform, and we've shared some things that we've been thinking through, and we're suggesting that, you get your staff together and kind of create your own proactive plan. So when the questions come at you, you're ready, you have options. And so to have already thought through the scenarios and have those creative solutions ready and in hand before you need them is going to be more important than ever. But we would love to hear from you if you have more questions or if you have suggestions or other things you've been doing. I think that we would love to learn. We would, R&D, as someone told me once, that you rip off, what is it? It's not research and design. Well, shoot, now I forgot.
Don't have that one.
No, don't have
okay.
that one.
I will encourage all my colleagues to view this whole experience as an opportunity. We're choosing to look at this as an opportunity to get a lot more. If there is none of the traditional trappings of a high school band program, no marching band, fewer concerts, whatever those things look like, we're just going to look at that as an opportunity to do more teaching. The performance pressure is often an obstacle to getting real musicianship taught. And for those of us who teach high school band, those immediate performance pressures of early season football, they really get in the way of doing meaningful music education. And so if that's not there, will our kids miss it? Sure. Will we miss portions of it? Sure. But we'll look at that as an opportunity to just, roll the sleeves up and do more teaching. And so I hope that my colleagues will look at that the same way as well.
Sure. And so just to recap quickly, be proactive again. You got to prove your value more than ever, and just continue to do that with both like real hard data and those anecdotal stories. And you put those together, and you've got a pretty powerful, compelling story to show your value. Also, moments matter. And so as you wrap up this year, as you think through the next year, be very intentional about some of these things, because they're going to be new. They're likely going to be new, or at least they're going to be slightly different. And so making sure that we're capitalizing on those moments and making sure that it's all about the student experience, and it's not just a constant level of frustration that everything seems to be new with everyone. And, it's been fun doing this and thinking through this. And so, look at it as an opportunity. There's so many things that will be different, but looking at it with a positive outlook and having those things say, like, we've never been able to do this. That's a good thing. Now we can actually do this, and just try to use that type of approach when you're kind of navigating these different waters. And so, again, if you have questions, send them on to us. We're going to hang around with Alexa for a little bit and answer anything else that you might have. So tune in weeknights, Monday through Thursday at 7 p.m. Central Time to watch Keeping the Beat live. And remember to tell your friends about the program. Presenters who wish to apply to host an episode send applications via tnmea.org. And so thanks for watching. And hope you heard something that resonated with you and will work with you later. And thanks so much.